Hello, everybody, and welcome to this The Legends podcast with Sarah Furuya Coaching. I'm Sarah Furuya, and I believe there are many ways to lead a life, and everybody has stories. And today I have another movement specialist with us today for my very fucking creative series, season 5. That is Tania Coke. Hi, Tania.
Hi, Sarah.
Nice to see you.
You too. Very excited to be here.
Great. So the first question I ask all my guests, Tania, before I give you your rock star introduction is, tell me a story. So everybody has stories. So tell me a story that's had an impact and influence on you, or that, you know, that you think is quite interesting to tell.
Okay, I'll tell a story from my life.
Oh.
And it happens in Japan. The first time I came to Japan, and I was thinking about whether I would move to Japan with my then boyfriend, Kentaro. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit overwhelmed and sort of anxious about this. This is a big decision, leaving the UK, everything I knew, everyone, all my contacts. But I had a moment where I was in the sea. We were actually I've forgotten where we were. Anyway, I was in the sea and I was just sitting in the shallows, and I noticed my body moving, my arms flowing in the water. And I realized I'm not moving my arms. They're being moved by the water. The tide is moving me, and I like it. And it made me think of seaweed and the way that seaweed is anchored to the bottom of the ocean, but it just, on top of that, it sways completely at the mercy of the tides. And so I decided at that point that, first of all, I would make a show about seaweed. And second, that I would live my life like seaweed, anchored in something strongly, but allowing myself, to be pushed around by the tides and not resist. Allow myself to be led by the influences around me. The end.
How's that worked out for you then? How did that change things for you, and how has that influenced you? I love it.
Well, I did make a show, and the main title was a seaweed story, but the subtitle was something like The Marriage of Logic and Lunacy. Because I'd always seen myself as a logical person, and I did logic as part of my degree. And so when I started to think about seaweed and allowing the lunatic, which is related to the moon, seaweed, it was like welcoming the two parts of me at the same time, trying to hold the two parts of me at the same time. And yeah, they're still in me. It's sort of, I'd say for a while, when I first had this sort of big transition in my life, which I'll probably tell you about in a little bit later, I sort of veered strongly on the side of lunacy. And the logic went out the window.
Bravo.
And there were things like I just got fed up with words. I thought words are sort of, they're so old fashioned, and I want to just express myself with my body. And so I went very extreme in one direction, and then gradually I've sort of learned to enjoy both and use both at different times. So the logic and the lunacy are a little more at peace inside me.
How do you know when you're going too far in one or the other direction, and how do you bring yourself back?
That's an interesting question. I don't try.
I
think I just know that life will, maybe I suppose if it got dangerously extreme in one direction, maybe I just haven't got to that stage. There's always something that seems to pull me back. Something happens. I think it's probably good. I'd like to allow myself to go a little bit further than I might dare. And just trust that. I'm thinking particularly about going towards lunacy.
Yeah.
And trust that by now I'm anchored enough on the ocean bed
Yes.
That however far I get pulled in one direction, I'll still stay rooted, grounded, anchored. But it's, it's a, I say that with awareness that there is a risk.
With some caution.
Yeah. I think probably I could rely on loved ones to say something at some point.
What about when you go too far in the logic direction? What happens then?
Oh, that's a nice question as well.
People pay me for this.
I can see why. I get annoyed with myself quite quickly.
Yeah, me too.
So I have a stronger sort of self-regulator on that. It's like, oh, that's so boring, Tanya. I love logic.
Yeah, me too.
I really do. I love Excel spreadsheets.
Oh no, not that.
I really do. I find beauty in logic. I'm thinking also of the kind of logic you would find in a Bach fugue.
Okay, yes.
So logical that the beauty is what you feel most, and it's only by kind of actively stopping yourself and say, okay, I'm going to analyze the logic, and then you see all the patterns, the perfection of it, and then you acknowledge the logic. But as I'm listening to it, I'm not thinking, I'm just lost in the beauty.
Now I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, a lot of your dances and a lot of your performances are like fugues, and then I realized actually one of the ones I've seen was called Tokyo Fugue. So nice. That's not me being a genius at all. So with that, since we've kind of segued into talking about your movement specialty, I'd like to jump into your bio. So Tania Coke. Tania Coke is artistic director of Tarinainanika, a physical theatre company she runs together with Kentaro Suyama from their base in Osaka, the Flying Carpet Factory. The company specialises in corporeal mime, an art form centred on the creativity and physical expression of the actor. As well as the company, they run a full-time school where they are busy nurturing the next generation of actor creators. Originally from the UK, Tania began her career as a management consultant working in London and Paris. She is also a qualified mediator and writes articles about communication and conflict management. She is the Japan ambassador for the Royal Society of Arts, the RSA, and a board member of the RSA Japan Fellows Network. You can find her all over social media, and we'll get those links at the end of the conversation. She's also, I've been to see a few of her performances, and they are absolutely terrific. Really something else. There's voice involved, there's words involved, there's fugue involved, that kind of repetition, as she was talking about with Bach before, where things are just slightly different with each repetition, but also the same and also patterned. She is a terrific mediator. I've also attended her mediation workshops because I'm just such a curious, lifelong learner kind of person. I never usually refer to myself like that, but really great. And she's just a lovely, lovely, ebullient spirit with so much integrity. I think that's a word that I would use to describe you really strongly, as a terrific amount of integrity. And a fun fact about us is we went through a 6-month leadership journey together called Flourish back in 2014, 2015. And funnily enough, I just found a few of the photographs from that as I was emptying my Dropbox out, because I'm going to transfer everything over today. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I might go on Facebook and say hi to that group and just reconnect with everybody. And that was quite the journey, wasn't it? That was quite an interesting transformative thing. I was one of the lead coaches, and Tania was one of the attendees. But actually, when most coaches will tell you that when you're taking people through a journey program, you're on the journey as well. So it was a really interesting experience. And in fact, Zoe, who was in this series, the dancer Zoe, was also one of the coaches on that, one of the dance coaches. So I'm loving that I've got all these movement specialists in here as well. Oh,
And that's just reminded me. I just had a flashback. I hadn't thought about the Flourish program for a while. 7 or 8 years ago, you're saying that is.
Unbelievable, right? 2014, it started to 2015.
And I suddenly remembered, I think it was the last, one of the wrapping up sessions was what's your big breakthrough or kind of discovery about yourself? And mine was something like, I can be normal. Something like I'm normal. I think it was a time, I mean, it has a special meaning to me at that time, which was something like, because it was such a together journey, I felt more connected to people around me than I had done for a while. I'd felt sort of different.
Like a bit of a loner.
From having moved from the UK to Japan and all the obvious differences that you feel from that. And also having left the world of management consulting and gone into the world of physical theatre. So
lunacy.
Lunacy. Yeah, that's what I was telling myself. And then I suddenly realized, okay, that's one role I can play, but I'm also normal in the sense that, I share all these challenges with other people. I'm just another one like everyone else. And that was a really lovely and surprising discovery. Thank you for that.
And you're far from normal, but I understand what you mean. It means that like your way of leading a life perhaps is equally as good as the next person's, or something along that, or equally as valid, or equally as, I don't know,
it was something, I suppose, along the lines of, for me, I was feeling a bit alienated from my fellow human beings.
Yes.
And I didn't want that. I didn't want to feel like I was different. And kind of reconnected me, because it was, a group of us going through this journey together, and we bonded, and we really felt the fact of being on a shared journey.
And I think everybody respected each other as well a great deal. Like, you walked in and nobody was like, who's this?
Well, I hope not. I'm glad you say that.
No, but for each person as well, there's that, and especially as you had taken this massive leap of faith and you were doing something, I think there was other people there as well. There was a dancer, there was a mask maker, there was a lot of creative people on that journey. There was an interpreter, there were people who were in the corporate there as well. Me, who was not far into my kind of independent journey as well, but there was no hierarchy. It was everybody was there and respected each other and had something to bring to the table that everybody else wanted and needed. And everybody saw each other in that way. So nobody was like, who's this? It was just very, very non-hierarchical, I think, in that way.
Yeah.
And it is a massive leap of faith to go from being a management consultant to kind of throwing yourself full time into this kind of artistic life. I remember when I met you, I was so impressed. I was really like, wow, all right. This is great. I remember the first PowerPoint you showed me about the movement and all the way that you looked at things. So we'll talk about that later, no doubt. But what I'd love to ask you first is if you could tell us about your childhood, your background, and your upbringing.
Okay. Gosh, I haven't spoken about this for a long time. This is going to be nice. Interesting. Oh. Childhood, background, and upbringing. My mother comes from the Philippines originally, and she's half Filipina and half, American. Her father was an American national, but his parents were European Jews who moved to America. My father, who died 2 years ago, was British, but he spent his life, he was born in Sri Lanka, and he has lived in many different countries. So I suppose the first thing to say is I'm a gypsy.
I was just thinking like it from a nomad stock.
Yeah, nomadic. And here I am now in Japan, having previously had no contact with Japan up until my late 20s. So there's that. And then in terms of where I've lived, I was born in the UK in the home counties in Bucks. And then
Buckinghamshire. Yeah, so what's that like? East or west? It's just west? Northwest?
That is northwest
of London.
But
it's kind of commuter.
Yeah, it's barely outside London. It's pretty much London.
Yeah.
And at the age of 2, my father was posted to Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
He was working with the government. And so we spent 2 years in Northern Ireland in the kind of place where we lived on a military camp, military base. So in order to enter, there were people with guns, men with guns. And there was always this sort of threat of violence in the air. I remember that, even though I was just 2 years old. And then age 4, we came back to the UK. And age 6, my dad was posted to Germany. So then again, we were living in a sort of military camp.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents both had this very strong feeling that they wanted to give me the best education possible. And they sent me back. They didn't want me to be in school in Germany because the education system is, I think, 1 year, sort of 1 year, you start 1 year later.
Gotcha. So where you'd start in 4 in the UK, you'd start 5 in Germany, something like that. Yeah. Okay.
So they were worried that I would sort of fall back. So they sent me to boarding school from age of 7.
Wow.
Yeah. My sister was already at boarding school. So for me, it wasn't a big deal at all. Okay. I mean, many people go, oh my gosh, how could they do that? Are they monsters? How could they do For me, it was no problem. For my parents, especially for my mother, it was really tough.
Yeah.
But they thought it was the best thing for me. So off I went to boarding school age 7. And I won't go into that. Not too much to say about that. Very strict, very logical.
Yeah, that's where you learned your logic.
Actually, can I throw in another story?
Sure.
Well, anecdote. On the theme of logic, I remember a time in my last year at school where we had a new headmistress. And she, unlike the old headmistress, was very keen on league tables and comparing us with other schools. And so every, whatever it was, assembly, or I can't remember the terminology, she would say, yes, girls, we have got X% of A grades and blah, 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 and this kind of stuff. And it was just sort of forced down our throats. And I felt this really strong emotional reaction to this. And so a friend of mine and I led a petition. We got people to sign saying, we don't want to be treated like cogs in a machine. We're human beings. And then I can't quite remember who we submitted it to someone, and the headmistress didn't see us about it, but the deputy headmistress saw us about it and was sort of just a bit diplomatic. We kind of understood, well, there's nothing we can do that's going to happen about it. And that went away. But that, I think, it ties in very strongly for me with the conversation we started off this with about the logic and lunacy, that I love logic, but I don't want to be treated like a computer.
That's amazing. There's such lunacy in that as well, isn't there? But actually, if I'm thinking about it, you seem to have quite a strong sense of justice, which perhaps also ties in with the mediation. What do you think? I saw a little flicker in your face there.
That's interesting. Well, when the first thing that flickered when you said justice was kind of misplaced, what's the word? Outrage. What's the word when you get really angry about something? It's kind of righteous indignation.
Oh.
So not particularly something I'm proud of at all, but there were times at school when I would get told off for something and I was furious. Just goes, how dare you? How dare they? If it was something I didn't agree with, or even if it was, there was one thing I got told off for, and I knew I'd done something terrible. So I thought, why beat me up about it? I'm already beating myself up about it. I held up the entire school for the beginning of a GCSE or some public exam. I was late. And I felt so bad because everyone was, how nervous you are, but waiting to start a public exam. And I'd held everyone up. I felt terrible. And then someone sort of started giving me a moral lecture about it. I said, you don't need to do this, Anyway, so that was my first thought when you said sense of justice.
Oh.
Not really, I would say a kind of a very noble kind of justice. But when you connected it with mediation?
Maybe not.
No, actually, no, because for me, mediation is not about justice.
No.
It's about making sense and making decisions for yourself.
Interesting.
And so and then there are many different types of mediation, and there are some where it's more about, okay, a mediator will influence the parties one way or another and put forward their view of what's right and what's wrong. But the kind of mediation I like best is where the mediator really makes a commitment to not putting in an opinion and listening to both sides and saying, okay, just trying to be a mirror so that they can make some sense of the situation they're in and make sense and make better decisions. Like, what do I want? Become clear of their agency, their choices and their power.
Choices and power. Interesting. So that righteous indignation then, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, that's a goodie. Where does it come from? I can hear my father saying, how dare you? So it might come from, the part of it might be sort of an inherited thing. Maybe it ties into the mediation in an unexpected way, which is that I have a very strong, if you sort of see the world as either black and white or gray, I'm totally on the gray side.
Yeah.
I just revel in all the ambiguities and the doubts and the, I don't know what's certain. I'd be quite ready to believe there's an alien sitting on my shoulder right now. And that this table isn't here, many things that I'm open to. And why am I saying that? Just that subjectivity is that everyone has a different worldview. I'll just wait for that. Can you hear that very loud?
No.
Can't. My headphones fine. So yeah, I have this strong sense that everyone is unique and has a very different worldview, and that therefore rules are, it's fine as a guideline, and I can see the benefits, social benefits of rules. But, to follow rules blindly without thinking about the circumstances and the unique people involved and the this and the that does make me enraged. Yeah. If I know that I suspect many people make decisions not on logical grounds, on maybe reasons we don't even understand why. And so somehow that should translate onto how we administer justice, if that's what we're doing, or judge people. So I'm thinking of the teacher who's judging me, saying naughty because you broke this rule. But I suppose that even at that age, I was hoping that they would sort of say to me, so start by saying, so what happened, and try and see my point of view. First of all, maybe that's it. Yeah, wanting to have my point of view seen, rather than just sort of apply a blanket rule and, okay, someone broke a rule, naughty, let's tell them off.
Yeah. How does that work out in Japan for you? I mean, or is it, do you see the logic behind a lot of the stuff in Japan? Because I work my way through to think of a lot of the logic, but then sometimes the naughty thing kind of can get to me. But yeah, no shade to Japan whatsoever, but I think for most people there's quite a stereotype of it being quite a rule-driven place. Yeah.
Well, I mean, on one level, on a personal level, occasionally it has affected me. I remember I don't know if you can see, I've got very sort of frizzy, curly hair. Yeah. And I remember once getting onto a train, probably the Yamanote line in Tokyo once, and there was a sign on the wall with a picture of two ladies. One, it was a drawing, wasn't a photo. One had really tidy, smoothly sort of, coiffed hair and had a big tick by her. And then the one next to her had curly hair and it was crossed out like that.
I remember.
And I thought, what?
Whoa! Yeah.
I was shocked. But I suppose I'm perhaps lucky enough in that, I haven't gone through a Japanese education system. It never affected me. I'm a gaijin, and no one really has complained too much about things like that for me. So it hasn't affected me personally. Where it does, where I have thought about it more is as a teacher of acting and of physical acting. When we teach occasionally in the corporate sector and do an exercise, and the aim is generally the themes we teach around communication and creativity, and give people an exercise on an improvisation of some sort. You've got to make a little piece, and they'll say, okay, what are the rules? Well, this is art, and there are no rules. You make something you like. And for many people, it's scary for anyone. It's very scary. It's scary for anyone. It was scary for me as well, the first time having come from a management consulting background. But I would say probably if generalizing, in Japan, it's probably a little harder than elsewhere.
Yeah.
And we did, for example, there's a big thing. We did some training in a bank it was the, what do you call it, orientation, or new grad training. Yeah. Exactly. And so as part of that, they're taught sort of business etiquette and this and that and this and that. So slightly tongue in cheek, one of our exercises was, okay, stand on opposite sides of the room. You come into the center and you shake hands. And as you know, the way you bow in Japan, there are kind of rules around that. But we said the one rule is you have to do it in a way you've never done it before. And so all of them went through this one after the other, and they weren't allowed to do it in the way that anyone else had done it before. So by the end, they were sort of rolling on the floor and, putting that one arm onto the other or between their legs to shake hands. And it was really fun.
I love that. I might have that at my client's party this year.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or something similar. I've done it with something similar with words before. So you went to boarding school, and you lived in Northern Ireland. You lived in Germany for a short amount of time. And for anybody listening who doesn't really understand the context of Northern Ireland when we were young, I think there's maybe about 5 years between you and I. I'm not sure.
I'm 46.
Okay, yeah, so 4 years between us. So we're in the same generation. My point being is that there was a lot of unrest in Northern Ireland when we were young. There was essentially a war, and so between the British and the Irish, and you can look more into that. The country was kind of divided by Northern Ireland and then Ireland, and there was a Catholic and Protestant element to that as well. There was a strong military presence there, but it was very violent, some places were very dangerous. There were kind of weekly explosions, and what we call the mainland, which is the mainland of England, was also getting bombed quite regularly as well at that time. So it was quite a moment in history. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context to that.
Thank you. Yeah, for that.
Okay.
Can I just sort of pick up on something you said in there? I'm not quite sure how this relates to any question you've asked me, but I'll say it anyway. Another part, I don't even know if it's righteous indignation, but something that drives me, just really tears me apart, is the idea of people doing violence to one another on the basis of a label. You are Christian or in Protestant or Catholic, you are British or whatever. And another little story, in fact, from my letters, I mentioned my mother's father was an American by nationality, who we don't even quite know, but he may have been born in Europe and then moved to America just after being born with his parents, who were from Romania and Germany. So he got this, American passport. Then he ended up in the Philippines during Second World War. And he had really good relationships with a lot of Japanese people in the Philippines through trade, through business that he was doing. He had a plantation, coconut plantation, and he had lots of Japanese people as business partners or people working there. And when the war broke out and Japanese became the enemy for the Filipinos and vice versa, he, according to his diary, he sent out a message to all the Japanese people in the area saying, if anyone's not feeling secure, come and stay in my plantation and I will protect you. So a bunch of people did. And that went on for a while. And then war continued and things progressed as they do. And there came a point where the balance of power was so much in the favor of the Japanese that where he could no longer protect the people on his plantation. And eventually something happened where there was a Japanese ship that was this was in the south of the Philippines, in Davao. And this ship, they wanted to get up to Manila. Mm. But obviously there was a threat from the air of being bombed by American forces. So the Japanese army at the time, they gathered up as many American people as they could. And they took them and they put them on top of the ship and made them wave white flags so that the boat wouldn't be bombed. Hmm. And so when the boat got to Manila, they put them all in prison. And he survived, but only just, very malnourished. And the war ended. He just got home, but died shortly afterwards. Hmm. So the point of this story, other than that, just extraordinary
it's extraordinary.
Originally, his parents were Jews in Europe who left Europe because they were Jews and they were feeling unsafe. So they go to America. And the son is born and he gets an American passport. And now he is persecuted for being an American. Mm. I mean, if you knew, how stupid are we? How stupid are we?
Oh, utterly. It's absolutely bonkers. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't end there, does it? I mean.
Yeah. No. I
mean,
yeah.
So the label of woman at the moment, which is under attack, but never mind. So let's move on then. And I'm really fascinated to hear more about this. Now, tell me that one of the that is a really fascinating story. I think I love it when we get like a little historical snapshot of something as well. Like I just learned so much in just that 5 minutes. Yeah. My friend Alex opened with a story about living in Serbia when Belgrade was being bombed. It's just like, oh my God, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. So I really appreciate you having shared that with us. Was one of your pieces related to that somehow?
Yeah. Good memory.
Yes. Yeah.
So the reason my grandfather was in the Philippines, let me think. No, he went there. Anyway, at first he was working as he was a chemist by trade, in fact, originally making sort of shampoos and things like that. But he had a love of the arts and he started making movies. And his wife at the time, not my grandmother, his wife at the time was a Filipina actress. And so together they made movies. And they made movies actually about the Philippine national hero, Jose Rizal.
Okay.
And so we're talking about right at the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay.
He made movies in the Philippines. And tragically, these movies were lost in the war because at the time when he was captured and taken away, the Japanese soldiers took over his home and used it as a base, and everything in there was lost. But I was thinking about those one day, and I was like, what would I give to watch those movies? Well, I'll imagine them. We'll make them. So I made a show, which was a stage production. I had mainly two actors on stage. One Canadian actor was acting my grandfather, and one Japanese actress who was acting as my grandmother. So not the lady who was, it was a later wife, because the first wife died of sudden illness, very young. Mm. And anyway, I won't go into the whole story there. But anyway, so those were the two main characters on stage. And it's set in a time of my life where my grandfather is nostalgic and reflecting on the past, and he gets out these old reels from his old movies and he watches them. And so we had to make those scenes to project on stage. And in those, it was me and my husband, Ken, acting as the sort of main characters, one of which was his earlier wife, whose role I was playing. So that's probably the show you're referring to. Yeah,
I am. Yeah, it was just really fascinating, and I love this backstory as well. how clever you are to, I mean, this says a lot to memory and how we experience the world as well. Is like, we can dream things up left, right, and center. You dreamed up being seaweed. You dreamed up this, so I don't know anything about these movies, so I'm just going to dream them up and actually make something that talks about it. And there's a deep humility in you playing your grandfather's previous wife as well. There's something really wild about that. Like, it's just so terrific. And I suppose there's that marriage between lunacy and logic, because to put on a performance like that, there is such rigor. I think
there is. And I just, in fact, another way to see that logic and lunacy theme in that show was that I was thinking about this relationship between my grandfather and my grandmother. And my grandfather came from a very educated background. He had lots of books. He loved poetry. And with his first wife, they used to have these poetry readings, and then they made films together about classic, books based on history. But when she died, he was absolutely devastated, and he was on his own for a long time. He ended up marrying the person who was helping clean his house. And that's my grandmother. And she didn't have that kind of background at all. I only met her once, so I don't really know that much about her. But whilst he was this sort of man of very sort of Western style literature and books, she was, as I sense her, very sort of intuitive, much more on the sort of emotional and intuitive side, and he was more the logic and the words. And so I sort of, as it's your right as an artist, it's just sort of stereotyped them, simplified them to sort of emphasize this sort of and many differences, the Western male words-based sort of logical archetype, let's say, not stereotype, archetype, and the Eastern female emotional, intuitive archetype. And what an amazing, powerful partnership that is. I feel both sides of those really kind of coursing through my veins. And in fact, in making the show, I felt I became closer to my already dead grandmother through making it, through thinking about it more from her perspective. And how he must have, what I hear as well from my mother is that after his first wife died, he just kind of closed in on himself and just kind of hardened up. And she somehow, opened him up with her, softness and intuition. I in my imagination.
Softness and intuition, gorgeous. So from this soft intuition, I'd like to jump back into asking you about your studies at university and how you got into management consulting. It's kind of like and how you got into that. So you finished boarding school and you didn't have you had a reasonable experience there.
Yes, I did. I learned how to play the game and I survived. I survived. I didn't, what can I say about it? I kind of observed what it took to sort of survive. I think, a bit of a chameleon, and thought, okay, so that's the kind of person that is, I kind of blended in, I think. And it wasn't a given. It was quite difficult for me because I was very nerdy and very square, and rather sort of softly spoken and sort of, and I surrounded by all these people who seemed so sort of strong and brash and sure of themselves and cool and sassy and all the rest of it. So I was pretty intimidated for quite a while. But somehow I just mucked along. I found a way to muck along and survived.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And then you went to Oxford or Cambridge?
I went to Oxford.
Yes.
And
what did you read?
I studied a course called Philosophy, Politics and Economics.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what I wanted to study, but just before I had to sort of make a decision, I suddenly developed an interest in philosophy. I think I picked up a book. It was actually Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And also I think I picked up a book of Plato, something, The Republic or something like that. And I suddenly thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And these big ideas, kind of wow. And so I discovered that they both had some connection with philosophy. I thought, I want to do philosophy, but I found you couldn't just do philosophy at Oxford. You had to do it in combination with something else. Maybe it's changed now, I don't know. But anyway, that was the case. And so I did this course. It kind of comes as a package, philosophy, politics, and economics. I did that. And you're allowed to give up one of the three, the PP and E, after 1 year. So I gave up the politics. So in fact, I studied PE. That's an in-joke if you're not British. PE is physical education for mostly when you hear that. So I did mostly philosophy and a little bit of economics. And within the philosophy, what I loved best was formal logic and aesthetics. Those are my two favorite papers.
What's aesthetics?
Aesthetics is the study of beauty.
Okay. I mean, that's what I thought, but I don't know against the philosophical backdrop.
Yeah. It's a study of beauty. What is beauty? You know, how do you define it? And you know, what is its significance? And is it in the eye of the beholder? All that kind of thing. Yeah. And I love that. So I did that. And when I left university, again, I didn't know really what to do. I didn't have a strong sense from a young age. Well, apart from something else, but that's another story. From in my sort of early teens onwards, I didn't have a strong sense of what I wanted to be. I sort of assumed I'd be wearing a suit.
You had a general sense.
I had a general kind of image based on looking around me and sort of the absorbed vibes from my parents. And the one thing I was interested in, there was European integration, because that seemed like a big historical development of our times. That was just sort of... We can laugh about it now, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's a nervous laugh.
I know, nervous laugh, exactly. So I did an internship at the European Commission. So I kind of delayed starting a job so that I could go and do that in whatever the timing was. That was just a couple of months. And during that time, I met a bunch of other people and spoke to them about what jobs they were doing and thought, you know, what sounds interesting. And in the end, came back to what was quite a cliche at the time for me, management consulting, because that was something that was sort of being pushed at me. But I did it because I thought it would be varied work. And since I didn't know what I wanted to do, I thought at least do a lot of different things. And it was really interesting. I got to look at many different industries, from sort of IT industry to vending machine maker companies. I mean, so many different businesses, because we were doing a lot of commercial due diligence for private equity companies. So private equity companies would go and buy a company, try and do something to it, and then sell it for a lot more money. And so they would ask people like our company to sort of review the target companies that they were thinking of buying. And so that was fun. I learned about lots of different industries, but I got a sense fairly quickly on this isn't really what I was put on this earth to do. And I first thing that happened was I realized within business, I'm most interested in the people side of business. And so I was lucky that in my company, there was a chance I sort of stepped away from the private equity and due diligence world and went more towards the sort of corporate clients where the issues were more about, okay, how do we structure our organization? Or, what about culture change? How can we bring about culture change in our organization? And that was really interesting. And then at about that time, I met someone, a little by the by, at a 5 rhythms class. Have you had a 5 rhythms?
I've done 5 rhythms. Yeah, 5 rhythms. Yeah, that's seaweed. One of those is seaweed, isn't it?
Yeah. And I got somehow sucked up into the 5 rhythms world and just went once a week to do 5 rhythms dancing, and I loved it. This was before anything.
Zoe did that as well on a regular basis. Yeah, of course. Go on.
And I was just chatting to someone there, and they introduced themselves as, they said, what's your job? I said, and he said, conflict management. Well, that sounds cool. I had no idea what it was. I just thought it sounded cool. So I looked into it, and it turned out that I could go and do some training at this place called the Center for, oh my gosh, CEDR, Center for something or other decision making. Oh my gosh, I can't remember at all what it stands for. Anyway, it's a sort of place where you get trained in how to mediate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the mediation sort of part of the puzzle fits in. And then shortly after that, I picked up a flyer for a workshop in something called Corporeal Mime. It was at the back of a program for the London International Mime Festival,
Mm-hmm.
which is still going today, very vibrant and popular festival of sort of physical theatre and mime and all sorts of things. And I just saw this advertisement for a workshop, and something in me said, oh, I think I'll do that. Why?
It's just the seaweed getting taken on a current.
Yeah. So I did it. Little did I know.
Yes.
I did it, and it was just a 2-day workshop. And it was like someone just kind of drew back the curtain on a world outside my window that I had no awareness of, no idea that it existed, but just in a little way. But there was something kind of vibrating inside.
Yes.
Me. And I kept in touch with this the school that gave the workshop, and they said, oh, we do a summer school as well, 2 weeks. I knew they had a full-time school, but obviously I couldn't do that because I was a management consultant. So I waited until the summer, when the summer workshop happened. And so I spent my summer that year in a darkened studio in North London. Mm-hmm. Instead of what I normally would have done at the time would be jump on a plane and go to Nepal or Venezuela and sit on a beach or something like that. So I didn't do that. I went to North London and did this 2-week summer school. And that's when it happens. My world cracked open. Really evidently and unavoidably. I couldn't deny it. I think on the end of the last day, I was cycling home. And I had tears just pouring from my eyes. It was the most dangerous cycle ride of my life. Somehow I made it home.
Yeah.
And I think I cried nonstop. I can't remember how many hours, but cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And I was someone who never cried very much and took pride in that. I remember when I was very little at boarding school, age of 7, and there'd be other people around me crying. And I would always think, I'm not going to cry. But it was more than I could take. It
was beyond.
Racked me up. It was really beyond. In fact, interesting, I think I will throw in this. The last time I'd cried like that was when I was 10 years old. Here's another part of the puzzle, up until the age of 10, ever since from, I don't know, let's say age 5, I was obsessed with ballet.
Oh.
I was absolutely certain that was the reason I was on this planet. And despite having had no proper training and just taking class once a week, which was not nearly enough, I somehow ended up taking the exam to the Junior Royal Ballet School, and I failed. And that was the end of my life, I thought. I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, and then I sort of pulled myself together and I put on my brave face, and I survived. Oh, that's come back again, isn't it? I survived. So from then on, any idea of anything fancy and wild like ballet or arts
it just felt very risky.
It was, yeah. I think everyone had been telling me, my headmistress had been saying, no, you don't want to be a ballerina. The irony was she had been a ballerina, amazingly. but she had an injury and she had to stop early. So she felt that she kind of wasted her career, and she was trying to protect me and say, don't go through that. It's too risky, and, do your exams and get a blah, blah, blah. So I just sort of took it to mean, okay, maybe they're all right. Maybe I shouldn't be, a ballerina. Maybe I'm supposed to take my exams. I got good grades and everything was easy. And okay, maybe that's my destiny.
Yeah.
And so that's what I assumed until 15 years later, age 25, I think, or 26, when I did this workshop. I think that's what cracked me open. I suddenly realized, hang on, this isn't me. And that was reawakened by that workshop.
So it was the same kind of switch that switched that flood of tears on or something, but it was just that
in the opposite direction.
Visceral sense of this is funny, isn't it, when people I mean, this is why I love that there are many ways to lead a life phrase, is because I feel so strongly about when people say, oh, you shouldn't do that. When somebody's clearly passionate about it, but it's not about you, it's about them. It's just, oh my God. I mean, careers advice in our day was just wild, wasn't it? It was bonkers. It was about 3 options.
What were yours? Tell me.
Oh, I mean, I don't even think I saw anybody, but I was given the choice of either lawyer or doctor.
Oh, really? We had probation officer. I remember that. And it was so funny because we figured at the time it was because somewhere out there was saying there's a shortage of, people doing probation officer jobs. So let's tell the younger generation to do that.
Oh,
we couldn't take it seriously. It was just everyone was being
probation officer. Because you're at boarding school, it's like a prison. I'm joking. And then, but for me also, it was like the sciences. Girls must do the sciences. They should be engineers or go into the sciences. I mean, Margaret Thatcher was a scientist prior to becoming a politician. So I think maybe that was part of it. And they were really trying to encourage going into STEM. But oh God, it was the worst. It took me a long time to recover from that. I felt a little bit like that with coaching, actually. When I first kind of got introduced to coaching, I was a bit like, by another mutual friend of ours, Adrienne, I was a bit like, what is this sorcery? And then when I started getting coached, I would be like on the floor just crying, like, it was such a relief, but also like,
yes, exactly. It's the relief just to say, that's who I am, or who I want to be, or at least that part of me exists. And I feel I've been suppressing it.
I know, and and I think when you've got a calling that strong, I don't know that everybody has that really strong sense of something. Maybe they do. I know a lot of just kind of very solid, straightforward, quite nice conservative people who don't really seem to be just quite happy with their day-to-day lives. But then I know a lot of people like us as well who have this passion and this fire, and who talk about being like seaweed, and and who have this and lunacy and logic, and they have this kind of, there's something else there. There's something else going on beneath the surface, and it's almost it's like a living death not doing it, and then until you realize, whoa, hang on, and then hopefully if like you and I, we had the means to be able to take a U-turn or go in the in a different direction. So take us, what happens next? So you come back, you cry your eyes out, and then you've got this mediation in play. You're still a management consultant. You've got this thing going on. Your husband is somewhere lingering in the future. So let's take us through to where we are.
Okay. All right. Okay. Here we go. So there I am. I've just got off my bike. I'm alive. I didn't crash. And I go upstairs and I'm crying. Anyway, I go back to work. That was a sort of Friday night. I go back to work on the Monday morning. I can't remember what happened that weekend at all. It's probably just a blur of tears. Monday morning, I go back to the office and I try to work, but I cannot. There's absolutely no way. So I take myself off into one of the little meeting rooms that isn't being used. And I sit there and I just take stock. What the hell's going on here? And I had a kind of epiphany. I had this image. I saw myself as a goat with a rope around its neck, And the rope is attached to a stake in the ground. And the rope, and the goat, get this right, the goat is walking in a circle around the stake. And suddenly the goat realizes there's no stake, or possibly there's no rope. One of the two. The point is, the goat suddenly realized I've been staying in this little circumference all my life because of some false assumption that I had to stay here. But in fact, I can go anywhere. I can go there, I can go there, I can go there, I can go there. And I suddenly entertained the possibility that I might become someone that I had never dreamt that I could be. And so then it all went from there. I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to join that full-time school. But I was very sensible. So at first I assumed I'd just go for 3 months. In fact, I assumed it would only be 3 months. I just get it out of my system. And so I put forward an argument to my boss that I should be allowed to go part-time for 3 months. And he was wonderful and very progressive and said, okay, Tania, yes, you do that. And after 3 months, I absolutely knew there was no way I could give up the mime. Absolutely no way. It would be like kind of chopping off my arm. So I went back to my very kind boss and said, can I extend for another year? And he sort of rolled his eyes and said, okay, Tania. And that, in fact, ended up continuing for 2.5 years. This double life of being a management consultant and a mime student. And at the end of that, I finally admitted to myself, Tania, this is quite serious. It's not just a whim. Let's quit the job. So I quit the job. And I finished, it was a 3-year program, training program in mime. So I finished the 3 years, I got a diploma, and then I stayed on to train in teaching and directing. And then I was invited to join the company that is made up of people from this school and run by the same people that run the school, Stephen Wasson and Corinne Soom, an amazingly inspiring couple that have really formed so much of who I am. And the thing that I'm most grateful about to them is their passion. That, you know, having basically it brought me back to life. Their passion. It was so strong that I suddenly thought, oh, it's possible to live like that. And I'd just never met anyone like that had that passion in my life. And so that's why I was sort of making do, because that's what it felt that was the right thing to do, what everyone did. And then I just encountered this fire and it burnt me and it woke me up.
Their passion brought me back to life. Wow, yeah. What a legacy. But I also want to give a massive shout out to the hidden hero of this, which is your manager in that consultancy.
Yes.
Because bravo them because what I think is like, that is such a that's such a radical thing to allow because it was long before COVID, right? It's long before like flexible working hours, probably even before Skype. So the idea that person would say, yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. It's just they were incredible. They were wonderful. That him and the company and the culture that he created in that company, which is why I joined them. I remember throw in another little anecdote on praising the unsung, the heroes of that in that way. When I was interviewed for the job, every other company, when they interviewed me, they would sit on the opposite side of the table and interview me, like very kind of. And he sat next to me on the table, and I think everyone in the company that interviewed me sat next to me as if, you know, we're here side by side. That really strongly impressed me. I really felt the kind of where that came from. And anyway, that continued, as you pointed out, all the way till the end of my time there. I just think it takes terrific courage inside a corporation to behave outside the norm, and that really, really moves me, along with you saying their passion brought you back to life. Wow, bravo, that manager is what I've just written on my piece of paper here. so take us through then to meeting your business partner, dancing partner / husband, and how that got, and then how you started your company, how you found your way to Japan. And another little tidbit I'd like to throw in here is, my brother's husband is also Japanese, also knows a couple who you know who are an English woman and a Japanese man.
Shun and Becky.
Yes. And I met them at the wedding and then suddenly realized that they knew you two as well. And it's just like, what a small world.
Yes.
And I suppose it is the Japanese community in London is a small world, a genuinely small world, but wow.
Yeah.
And the English wives of Japanese husbands, probably quite a small world too.
Yes. Definitely. It's normally the other way around.
Or right? English husbands of Japanese men as well.
Yes.
English husbands of Japanese husbands. Yes. So that's another little tidbit to throw in there. Anyway, so tell us, so bring us up to when you came to Tokyo and got involved with the RSA and then ended up moving to Osaka, etc. Let's bring it up.
All right. So there I am. I've done now actually, I need to backtrack a tiny bit, because during that time while I was a student already, I fell in love with a Japanese man who was in the company already. So he'd done his training. He was already teaching, in fact, as a teaching assistant. And so we stayed together for the rest of my time there and the rest of his time there. And it was with him that I first came to Japan and had that seaweed encounter. And at that time already, he was thinking about coming back to Japan and sort of saying, what do you think? Do you think you could live here? And so I decided yes. We decided yes, and we moved here in 2010, end of 2010. And we came here. He had left Japan age 18. He was then 36, so he felt like an outsider.
Yeah.
We moved to Tokyo, and he wasn't from Tokyo, so it was his first time as an adult living in Japan and first time living in Tokyo. So it was a huge change for him and for me. And we set up our company, tarinainanika. And we started teaching, and we started renting a studio in Sasazuka and teaching a couple of times a week. But we knew very early on we needed to get our own studio, because we wanted to be doing this full time, not just a few times a week, but it was so expensive to rent by the hour, and the risk was so high, because if you don't have any students, then you lose your money. And so we started searching for our own place that we could have 24/7. And for many years we searched in Tokyo. I probably bored you with stories of it.
Not bored, always fascinated.
But anyway, that was a dream for a very long time. And eventually we realized we couldn't afford anything in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Because, it's theater, we need space, we need high ceilings, and, you throw chairs around and things. Mm. And so we started to look outside Tokyo, and we thought, well, it has to be a big city, so there are lots of people to come and see things, or to come and study with us, or, get part-time work to support themselves. So Osaka was
There's the logic.
Logic. There you go. I mean, but the lunacy was that we didn't know Osaka. Ken, it's miles away from where Ken is from. He's from Gunma Ken, in the other part of Japan. But we just found a property that we liked. And so here we are. That's it, really. It's called the Flying Carpet Factory, as you said at the beginning. It's an old warehouse that was originally a tatami warehouse, and then became, they started dealing in carpets. So when we first came to look at it, the warehouse part downstairs was just covered in carpets. It looked like a sort of a souk, or some kind of Aladdin's cave. Wow. And so that's where the name came from, the Flying Carpet Factory. It looked magic. And so we built the studio for about the first year. I say I kind of tried to follow Ken's instructions and bang a few nails in. He's brilliant at that. But it was a big deal, because he had never actually built a studio pretty much from scratch before. Not built, but renovated a studio from scratch. So it was pretty high tension time, knowing that the consequences are huge if you make a mistake. But we ended up with a studio with all the lights and the proper dance sprung floor, and it's great. It was wonderful. And then in 2020, I think it must have been, we opened our school. That had been the big aim, to have a full-time school. And almost at exactly the same time, the pandemic began.
Yes.
So it's been a very slow start, but it is my dream, or the dream that I had for a long time. And it really is something that I keep pinching myself about to have. It's the dream of so many artists, especially, anyone whose work involves a studio. We live up here. We have our studio downstairs. We can use it any time of day or night. It's amazing.
So you're living the dream, basically.
Yes, yes, yes.
So what does tarinainanika mean?
It means the missing something. So tarinai is lacking or missing, and nanika is something. And if it was a proper verb, it would say nanika. Well, anyway, the structure would be different if.
Yes.
But it's a sort of a made-up word, that the missing something, we say in English. And it was actually a line from the first show that we made, or the title of the first show we made. And it was so nice that we kept it as a company name. And it works for us because I think you yourself, you mentioned that every show we make looks like a fugue. Well, a fugue is about searching. It actually comes from, originally the word fugit is like flight or escape, searching for something. Fleeing or searching. And so all our shows are about some kind of search.
Yeah.
So it fits very well as our company name. So we've been making shows, teaching since we started the company. We started to go on international tours. We managed 2, and then again, the pandemic happened, so we haven't been on international tour, but maybe next year we'll see. We're just making a new show now.
But you were at the Edinburgh Festival, is that right?
We were digitally.
Oh,
so
okay.
Digitally, yes. Last year and this year again, we'll submit some work digitally so that people can watch it online, because they realize that in this environment, there's so much uncertainty about hosting live shows, so they went digital. And so we benefited from that. And that's been amazing. But still, live touring would be good. So yes.
Yeah. It's only around the corner. I kind of predicted in my head, it's going to be 3 years this. Now I've just been back to the UK and things are kind of back to normal there. People aren't wearing masks and things like that. So, and this most recent strain doesn't seem to be quite as devastating as the first and second rounds were. So there's that. But I reckon early next year, February, March next year, I think we'll be.
Okay, I'll book my tour for then.
That's my only. I just looked back on old previous pandemics and went, right, okay, it's going to be 3 years, and then that helped me to just calm down a little bit. So I have 2 questions for you. Okay. Number 1 is, what is Corporeal Mime? And the second one, what's it like running a business with your husband and also being, kind of leaders in your field?
Oof, those are 2 big questions.
Massive.
How much time
but
have we got?
If you can give us the cliff notes, we've got 10 minutes. Give us the Brody's notes.
Okay. Corporeal Mime. Before I even try to define it, it's just worth thinking about how do you define poetry? How do you find music? How do you define it? It's very difficult to define, especially something, which is based on the body. But fundamentally, it's a form of acting. It's a theatrical art form, which is based on the expressive power of the body.
Corporeal being body.
Corporeal being body. Exactly. So whilst in much of traditional kind of mainstream Western theatre, the starting point is the written word, the play. For us, the starting point is the body and action and gesture and physical expression of all sorts. And there's an extraordinary technique and very developed and beautiful technique that helps you to find the full expressive power of your body. I wish we had more than 10 minutes, Sarah.
Yeah.
You've done
isn't there about 4 different movements? I seem to remember there was like certain different movements that you do to
No, I can't say there are 4 different movements. There's an infinite number of movements.
Okay.
There are a couple of different main sections of the technique.
Yes.
So one is to do with the rhythm of your action. So the dynamo rhythm of your action. So for example, if I'm going to reach forward towards you, that's an action.
Yeah.
And if I do it fast like that, or if I do it very slow, you get a very different feeling.
Yes.
From me. So that's one area of the study, is that anything you do, whether it's standing up or waving, anything you do has a rhythm, and becoming more aware of that and making more choices and being more dramatic in your choices, creative in your choices. Another part is the articulation of the body. So for example, if I'm here and I want to look at you, I can do a pure rotation to look at you. That's a pure geometric rotation.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that, which is a double design because I've got both a rotation and a lateral in there.
This is what I'm thinking of. These are the things I'm thinking of. It was like, there's this, then there's this, then there was all these different things you do, and we had to kind of make little sequences with a partner using these different things and mimic each other. It was so fun. And
so there's the I just did it with my head, but you can do it with this part of the body, with any part of the body, not any part of the body. You can't do it with your hands, but many of them so you train like you do with a musical instrument. We do scales with our body, for example. If it's a lateral, I do that with this part, I can do it with this part, etc. And then another big area is called counterweights, and that's basically to do with creating the illusion of weight and effort. And I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll take an hour to say to try and.
Is that when you're with somebody else, or is that when you're on your own?
It can be both. It can be both. It's basically the idea of using weight and effort to express either physical weight and effort or non-physical. So if you do something like this, that can look as like, okay, I'm lifting something heavy, or it can be some kind of emotional expression, and it's totally different from if you go like that. Making it look really light. So it's the study, and to do it on a big scale, you can't do it just with your arms. You have to involve the weight of your body. It's to do with gravity and physics.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a really interesting area which connects the physical world with the emotional world through similar kind of routes of action, which is called counterweights. It's amazing.
So the physical world with the emotional world through weights and action.
Yeah.
Incredible. So it's a really nice, concise way to put it.
Yeah.
So my next curiosity question, and maybe the final one, is what's it like working with your husband and both of you being leading performers in your area?
So I only know what it's like to have worked with one husband, so I can't really compare with like working with anyone else even, but it's amazing. We're totally different in every respect. I started talking to you about my grandfather and grandmother. I feel the same with us. We're just on paper opposites. And then there's the fact that when I first met him, he was already like legendary in our world of corporeal mime. And I was a management consultant, nerdy management consultant, putting my first foot on stage. So from all those respects, it's been a huge adventure developing the way we work together.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have this really strong ambition to become a sort of a shared a role model for what shared leadership might look like.
Oh,
yeah. And I realized really quite recently, just a few years ago, that when I think of leaders, I always think of one person. There's a leader, and then that person has, a secretary or people behind the scenes doing this, that, and the other, or or often a wife, doing things behind the screen. And I thought, why does it have to be that? Why? Because as I mentioned, my teachers, Stephen Boss and Corinne Soom, they were a leader together. And they brought these different qualities, being different people. She happened to be from France and he from United States. So they had those, and just being different human beings, they had different characteristics. And it was such a sort of a complementary whole. And I thought, that is something that I want to offer to the world, to offer, to the younger generation, a role model of that, because that means a lot to me. And when I stopped to think about it at a certain point, I can't remember when it was in my life, about all the people I consider leaders, they were all men.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized, it was about the same time, I suppose, that I realized how much precedence I'd given to logic and mind and words, as opposed to body and intuition and imagination and that kind of element of course they're all massively intermingled, but I felt
they are. Yes.
I felt that there was this kind of split inside me, and I'd sort of disregarded anything to do with the physical, unless it was to do with, okay, I need to wear clothes that look nice. It wasn't about how does my presence, how does my humanity depend on my physicality? How does the way I connect with people, relate to people, depend on my physicality?
Wait. Let's say that again for the cheap seats. Say it again. How does my humanity depend on my physicality? Oh my God. Okay.
What makes me human is hugely, of course, it's dependent on many things, but hugely dependent on my physicality, the way I experience myself, the way, therefore, I express myself, the way, therefore, people relate to me, and a whole sort of world. I associate a whole world of discovery with that idea, that which is related to I can be who I want, because physically we can change ourselves, I think, so much more easily than psychologically. Okay, generalization, but
no, I think that's a fair thing to say.
You can change the way you walk. You can say, I'm going to walk slowly today, or I'm going to walk fast today. I'm going to, stick my head in the air today as I walk around. I'm going to be this kind of person, or I'm going to be this kind of person. And you can do that, and it will change the way I feel. It will change the way people see me and relate to me. And it's much easier for me to do that than to say, I'm going to be a more confident person today. Just tell myself, psychologically, I'm going to be more this or more that. I find that very hard.
That's so interesting, because I've been met for many years after observing people for many years, and after doing many, many trainings and coaching many people saying, oh, I don't feel confident. And I was like, what is it? It was actually one of the co-facilitators, Tiffany. I observed her and I was like, what's the difference? What makes her very confident, even though I know a lot about her in the background? And it was simply that she just does things. She just gets on, she just does things. And you've almost kind of said the same thing there. It's like
action.
Exactly. She just does it. So I say, do you know what confidence is to people? It's doing things. It's just doing things. Don't wait to be confident to put that poem up. Just do it. You could be waiting for years to do it. And then there's there's the long-term proposition, which is all the other stuff which comes with it, which is like becoming and recognizing and noticing and building your confidence very, very deliberately. But to start with, JFDI, just flip and do it.
Do it. Like it. Hang on. JFDI. Thank you.
I run a little mastermind, and we often use that because sometimes we coach each other. I don't know if you remember, on our Flourish program, we did something called critical incidents, I think, or en passant feedback or something like that. So we did an en passant feedback critical incidents a couple of weeks ago. And, somebody just said to this artist, there's an element of just JFDI in this. So it's like, we can give you all of this advice, but there is an element of just JFDI.
Yeah. And another way I'd put it, which might sound a little bit off-putting to some people, but it's obviously, it depends how words, depends how you interpret it, which is pretend. It's actually kind of fake it till you make it. It's a variation of that. And that sounds negative, and I'm really not saying it in a negative way.
I know what you mean.
Positive. Like when I watch it, literally, I can change the way I walk, and then something has changed about the way I am.
Yeah. And that physicality has an impact on the people around you and your own humanity as well. Same as like, now I'm just a woman. Now I'm a woman with fabulous glasses. That's easy, right? That's easy. Now I'm one thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm another.
Exactly.
Right, and that's easy.
Seamlessly different things. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And now thank you. And now I should do it like.
You're doing it in the rhythm called in pop. That's brilliant. Okay,
so now I've just shown my terribly inept bit of corporeal mime there. I want to ask you my closing question. But before I do that, I want to know what's going on in the future for us and for you, and how can we find you? And I know you've got some great stuff online as well. So how do we find you, and what's happening for you?
Okay, so we have a website, www.tarinainanika.com, and
we'll link to that
because no one's gonna, unless you're Japanese. And in terms of practical upcoming things, in 3 weeks time, 3 weeks today, we have a show opening here downstairs. So if you're anywhere near Osaka, please come and see our show about Rei Kamoi. an amazing Japanese artist. So it's inspired by him. It's not just sort of his story, but it's inspired by this artist. So that's happening.
So can I have the dates for that? Because I'm part of me is going, am I free?
23rd and 24th of July.
Okay.
Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we have various in-person events over the summer. We've got a summer workshop on the 6th and 7th of August for anyone who wants to experience this art of the thinking body, which is a little nickname I didn't use earlier, but that's one of the ways to think of corporeal mime. Mm-hmm. We're doing quite a few things online as well. So I run regular online classes through our Patreon page, and we can maybe give a link to that.
Yes.
And as Sarah mentioned, we're participating in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year again. And so 2 of our shows will be viewable through that. Plus, we haven't actually fixed the dates, but we will have a free online viewing of each of them with a Q&A sometime in August. And I'll give a free online workshop through the Fringe as well. So those are all great ways to have a little taste of what we do for free. What else can I say? But best of all, come and study with us here. Yeah. Just come and just walk through the door. Just do it.
JFDI and have your world cracked open. So, Tania, there are many ways to lead a life. What does that mean to you?
Seaweed. It's seaweed. That's it. So how to lead a life. It means they're not called roots. I've actually forgotten the technical term. Find my base, my anchor, and then surrender to what comes. And then there's that combination of incredible strength and commitment with fluidity and abandon. And that's my idea of how to live a life.
Oh, I love it. Just so good. So, Tania, thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. It's been so many stories come out of these conversations. I can't believe I just learned so much about Philippine history and just an American history and your experience. I didn't know about boarding school and things like that. It's just really interesting to hear your experience and all these wonderful guides who showed up along the way, like, the passion that brought you to life from your 2 mentors. But not only that, but that quiet background thing of that manager who said, go ahead, go and do what you need to do. What a mensch, what a great guy. And I'm
going to write to him, by the way, and tell him, pass on what you said. I'm going to write to him and tell him what you just said.
Get him to watch the podcast. We could dedicate it to him. And but I think that just takes an enormous amount of courage. I really do, because you have to stand out in the corporate world is something quite something, I feel. And then meeting the love of your life and creating this partnered leadership that you want to become the embodiment of, which I just absolutely love this idea. And perhaps that's where I went wrong when me and my husband had our first attempt at starting something together, was that it didn't end up like that. And so I'm taking that very much to heart as a piece that is something that I will take from here, along with be like seaweed, like commit, but be fluid and all that beautiful stuff there. And, this role model for what shared leadership looks like, eminent and unavoidable passion that rises in people sometimes, and being able to follow that. What an absolute treat it's been to talk to you. So thank you again, Tania.
Thank you, Sarah. It's the fizzing that happens between us. That's what it is.
Yes, the fizzing that happens between us. She was just using her hands there, miming fizzing with her fingers, which is gorgeous.
I loved it.
Me too. It was just brilliant. So thank you very much. This is the Legends Podcast, the very fucking creative series, season 5. Tania, thank you so much. I believe there are many ways to lead a life, and everybody has stories, and it's been absolutely terrifically fascinating to listen to Tania's today. So thank you so much. Bye.